Mesdames et messieurs,
Ladies and gentlemen, members of the coalition of the Geneva Summit, members of the jury, ladies and gentlemen, the 2020 Summit of Geneva for Human Rights and Democracy has awarded me the Diploma of Courage. I would like to express my gratitude. However, I would like to express a nuance. When you're a child and you experience injustice that you've inherited from your ancestors and may very well transmit to your children, then addressing it, facing up to it, does not give you but one option: to resist. This is a means of survival, because in you there is still a glimmer of hope, a bit of will. The humanity in you demands that you fight. It's a reflex. Your body and your mind, although deeply pained, cause you to raise your head. And that's why I think that I do not deserve such a prestigious award. No one should be congratulated for hoping and acting in order to achieve a life of happiness and peace. We, the Black people of Mauritania, the offspring of slaves for centuries and recent victims of segregation, we are lucid about our status. Like many Black people over time and civilizations, my eyes were opened to my inferiority, which, as it was explained to me, comes from my dark skin, my pagan origin, that of my ancestors, and the will of God. And you will see that such a bad beginning led me to begin, earlier or later, public enemy number one. As of 2008, the year that the initiative, the abolitionist resurgence of Mauritania was born, I faced up to the facts and I accepted the fatality of sacrifice. After a decade of repressed demonstrations, condemnations, imprisonment, and ill treatment in the jails of state that were the same as those described by Hobbes, my comrades and I suffered the predictable consequence and were determined to refuse and deny racial hegemony. In September, a 14-year-old slave who was exploited in Britain was released after a hearing by a judge, despite the firm opposition of the public prosecutor. They brought her to the village 800 kilometers away, and they posted images and messages of victory on the social networks. In the recent past, our parents guarded the sheep, dug pits, prepared food, and they were not paid, and they worked day and night. Our women were scarcely clothed, and they were raped. Our offspring were given as gifts, wedding gifts, baby gifts. We were sold, we were bartered and exchanged for a dromedary, for cattle, a pearl, an ankle bracelet, or miraculous amulet. This sums up the mental universe that I, as an adolescent, had, and how I had to forge an identity and tried hard to imagine a future for myself. in April 2012. Tired of going along with the religious rhetoric of our masters, I decided after Friday prayers to burn in front of witnesses the books of Muslim law that codified the institution of slavery. And the fanatic crowds ran to the mosques, ran to the streets, and demanded my crucifixion. And for weeks and weeks, the public and private media gave them the monopoly to speak. The head of state at the time endorsed the call for murder, and then charged with rebelling against God. I was only saved thanks to my friends and outside help. I do not regret what I did, and I would do it again. And for a reason that I am unaware of, the ambassadors of Morocco and Russia blamed me in public. The ambassador of Syria defended me on government television. None of the representatives of the free world brought me any of the support that I expected, that I needed, because they claimed to be secular and Republican, and they should have had a duty to intervene. I will spare you the sordid narrative of the humiliations and the abuse that I suffered from in a tiny cell, day and night, during heat waves. But the irony of my fate, it was in that very cell that I became a deputy in September of 2018. The soldiers in charge of watching over me seemed sad of their need to stay at the prison working, and I left them with little regret, but with a great deal of pity. Since December of 2010, I have been subjected to 4 preventive detentions. My organization is still forbidden, and we are close to winning a record of 20 trials. At the presidential election in 2019, I ran right behind the current chief of state, who was supported by the notable people of the tribe and the army. But despite the massive proof of fraud, I recognized that the vote was wrong, and thus I avoided having to end my organization and give way to jihadism. So I extended my hand for dialogue, and I am still trying to gain the recognition of associations and parties that do not support discrimination against Black people. We are trying to abrogate the amnesty law that since 1993 protects the ringleaders of the mass deportations of torture and slaughter that have been committed between 1986 and 1991. And I would like to show you 2 different faces of victims of the attempt to carry out ethnic purification in Mauritania. Houlé Hai, who is 80 years old, has been stubborn for more than 3 decades in her fight to obtain the rehabilitation of her only son. This is one out of hundreds of other similar cases. Lieutenant Abdoulaye Sall died at the age of 31 as he was pulled apart between 2 moving cars ordered by his superiors in the army. We can only underline the paradox. The Mauritanian state that was brought into power in January of 22 at the Human Rights Council is gleefully flouting human dignity and violates human rights, even the most basic ones. Our suffering is not due to the West or to colonization or to the slave trade. It comes from within our African societies under the influence of the East. Like our parents and those before them, we have endured persecution that have been inflicted by our Arab Berber citizens. However, we share their religion, their faith, their worship, and often their land. We continue to call for equal access to the civil register, to the electoral lists, because we are sure that we are a majority. We represent more than 70% of the population. Elections will one day oblige our judges to stop covering up for the crime of slavery and to banalize négrocide. They will glorify international law. They will accept a minimum amount of universality, and they will give up pretending their belief in cultural relativism. One day Mauritania will abrogate Article 306 of the Penal Code that punishes with death the refuse to pray, blasphemy, and apostasy without the right to repent. I almost died of it. Applying the laws of Daesh and pretending to fight against terrorism creates a conundrum and a terrible lie. My country today is a favorable environment to set up an Islamist theocracy. This is a taboo, but it's true. And I am a whistleblower here today. And I welcome the young people and the intellectuals and the dissidents. They are generous and they show great self-will. And with your permission, I would like to dedicate to them this Courage Award. Ladies and gentlemen, the distinction of the year reinforces my commitment to peaceful alternation, thanks to the power of the ballot box. Clearly, I cannot respect the values of those who are oppressing me, but I will never encourage a coup d'etat or sedition or any use of force. The words or vectors of subversive ideas and proposals of a reform should be our exclusive weapons. We want to persuade instead of eliciting fear. Fear leads to one-upmanship, and that kills, and we choose life. Thank you.